Well, hello there and welcome back, my friends. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 489 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living. And on today's show, we're discussing the extracurriculars conundrum. Extracurriculars, by definition, means they're extra. And yet, so many children these days are overscheduled. They get home from school, maybe a quick snack, and then they're off to all the extracurriculars. How many are too many? When is it enough? What are the benefits of extracurriculars? But conversely, what are the benefits of downtime? That's what we're discussing today. Here to help me do all of that is Catherine Garland. Catherine is the host of the Homespun Create the Life You Crave podcast. Catherine, so thrilled to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
Well, anytime. Why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
I am first and foremost a mom to 4 amazing kiddos, and I am a lifelong learner, and I'm super passionate about the home and how we can cultivate the very best home life for our families that we can. So those are my main claims to fame.
And how did you start a podcast?
Well, that's one of those things. I feel like I started a podcast in my mind so long ago, and I just kept being told, you should blog, and you should blog. And I just thought, I don't like writing. And then I thought, well, but I can talk and I have lots that I want to say. So over time, it just kind of took shape in my mind. And I just knew that I had to talk about home life because it's just so important and so undervalued.
Well, we're talking about an aspect of home life today. And that, of course, is the extracurriculars. We're moving into fall, and fall, at least in my home, means back to school and more specifically back to the extracurriculars, the afternoon activities. And we parents, right, we're all united in the fact that we want our children to have all the opportunities available. We want them to be happy and smiling and reach their highest potential at every turn, right? And so in come the extracurriculars, which, if we're not careful, if we're not intentional about what we're signing up our kids for, we can spend an awful lot of money and we can get really darn stressed driving them here, there, and everywhere. So my question is, how do you do extracurriculars in your house?
That is such an interesting question because we have 4 kids, like I said, and we homeschool. So, I mean, on paper, we have all the time in the world to be driving here, there, and everywhere. But like anyone, we have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of money. And I have a finite amount of willingness to be a professional chauffeur, if I'm going to be honest. It's just never something I felt called to do. And as my children are getting older, I feel like I am stepping more into this like professional chauffeur role that I didn't really envision wanting. So it's all about that balance of what best serves the family as a whole and each individual child and my sanity. So what we've decided as a family is each of the children gets to choose one. This is like the general rule, one extracurricular activity. Generally speaking, we do nothing in the summer. We have very slow summers. We don't really travel much and we don't do activities. They might get to do a camp, but maybe, and that's a maybe, and it's one. But during the school year, like you said, that's extracurricular season, it seems to be. We let them each pick one, and it's not one where we're going to be there 5 nights a week each. Like I grew up a dancer and my brother was in hockey and baseball, and, you know, between practices and then competitions and then for him practices and tournaments, I don't even want to think about how much time my parents spent shuffling us around or the time and energy they spent in it. So for our kids, they get to pick one that's generally a 1 day or night a week thing. And then there's flexibility. My eldest has started martial arts and he wants to start training more, but the gym is close enough that he can bike. So we're considering letting him do another night. The reason we're only considering it is it does impact family dinner because the time of training, like you said, it's the finite amount of time and money, and family comes first every single time. We're very clear that it's like family dinner. So, you know, when the boys have martial arts training, that gets a little bit tricky. And we just always have to keep that in mind. So like when my daughter does horse stuff, sometimes she'll take her little sister with her. So they're still getting some connection. We just try and really incorporate family into every little bit because it's just family first. And the exceptions are always ones that they can kind of get themselves to.
Okay, you said so much there, Catherine, that I want to capitalize on. You said family first. That is so important because when it comes to the extracurricular conversation, if we're not intentional or careful or whatever adjective we want to use there, it becomes kid first. So what does the kid want? And then the family, the unit, the system reshuffles for the kid and what the kid wants. But it's not kid first, it's family first. And when we expand our lens and think what's best for the family unit, that includes what's best for the chauffeur. I don't know about you, Catherine, but for me, 5 days a week of after school, sitting in traffic, rushing, trying to get my kids to their things on time, that is not an environment that produces the best mother in me, right? Like it doesn't speak to my strengths. Let's put it like that. And so I love that family first idea, but we have to talk though about the benefits of extracurriculars, because I don't want to make it sound like you or I are saying, throw in the towel, get rid of all of them, because there are documented benefits on children, their social development, perhaps their intellectual, their gross motor, fine motor, all of it. So talk to us. Are extracurriculars valuable?
I mean, there's value in everything, especially when it's well thought out, right? If you're taking, like you said, if we're taking our time to consider what activities best suit our family and our child, of course, there's going to be tons of benefits. The main benefits that often come up in the discussions about them, people will argue that they perform better academically. I used to be a school teacher, and I'm going to be honest, this one is the one that I struggle with because I never saw a marked difference between children who did extracurriculars and who did not in academics, just in academics. But that often will be argued. And I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. I'm just going to say I never saw it personally. But experts will say it's good for character development. And I 100% agree with this. When we're exposed to different activities, different people, different situations, it teaches us a different way of interacting, a different way to manage ourselves. It teaches us how to push limit. It teaches us all of these things in a setting outside of, hanging out with our brother and playing basketball or sitting in the classroom with the same 20 odd kids every day for 10 months of the year. When we're in different situations with different people, obviously it's going to enhance our ability to have that in our character. Also, social development. And socially, of course, same thing. If you're around different people, it teaches you how to interact with different people. And if they're really positive interactions, if you have a positive interaction with your coaches, if you have a positive interaction with your teammates, there's nothing but benefits that can come from that. My children are starting to move into the teen years, and I just keep thinking, like, they often need a mentor outside of the family. And, maybe your teacher's not going to be that mentor, but maybe your basketball coach is. Maybe you're just really struggling with your mom, but your piano teacher who you've been with for 5 years is someone you might just be able to open up to after you've had a really bad fight with your friend. So, I mean, there's so much social development that can go into it as well, and so much exposure that they get from these varied experiences that they are extremely valuable when they're as an enhancement to life, not like we're not just rushing everywhere. Because I also think that if we're rushing everywhere, we won't have a chance to build those positive interactions, and the social development and the character development won't happen in the rush. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. And so going back to the family first mantra that you offered earlier, when we talk about how many activities, that's a question I get a lot. How do you know? How does a family know when there's too many extracurriculars on the table? And you aptly mentioned, think family first, not kid first. That makes a lot of sense to me. But what do you say to the children out there who want to do all the activities? Do you have a mantra, or what do you say?
I often will tell my kiddos that boredom matters and we need to be bored because it stretches our brain in a different way. So we just can't overschedule because we need to find that time to be creative, and we need to have space to really figure out what our passion is. If you're rushing from here, there, and everywhere, are you actually giving any activity enough attention to really know if it's something that you're truly passionate about, that you enjoy, and that you want to continue doing? So I wouldn't say that I have a specific mantra, but we've just always told our kids, one activity at a time. And if you don't like it, well, we won't sign up again. And if you really don't like it, we can leave partway through. I have my youngest last year, she chose gymnastics, and I can't remember how far we were into the session, and we pulled her because she just started not wanting to go. And it wasn't worth the stress on her poor little body to force her to go. And my eldest daughter is extremely, we call her kinesthetically gifted. Everything she seems to try, she seems to excel at. And as soon as they make it competitive, when she was in gymnastics, they made it competitive, she wanted out. When she did ballet and they moved it to competitive, she wanted out. She's done cheer. She's doing circus silks right now. But I also just make them know that you're not committed just because you tried it. So while we're not going to try 10 things starting this September, you can pick one. And if you don't like it, try something else in January when the new sessions start or what have you. There are some things that do require a year commitment, but those things are honestly few and far between, especially when they're younger. So I've always encouraged them to sample and to not worry about being fully committed, because it's an extracurricular. It's not, you don't have to sign your entire life over. It's not the decision to go to the Olympics just because you tried one boxing class.
I'm thinking about my 10-year-old. She is I'm not sure what the word could be to describe her, but she's willing to try anything. And so if I said to her, hey, you want to try Taekwondo? She'd say, sure. If I say, hey, you want to try softball? She would say, sure. She would say yes to everything if I let her. She would have her Monday through Friday and probably some activities on Saturday. Her schedule would be filled because she does like to try new things. But as the parent, I feel that it's on me to, even if she can't verbalize, even if she perhaps does not have the maturity yet to understand that downtime is vital for everybody, not just growing little humans, growing brains. Downtime is vital for all of us. And so I always am kind of renegotiating with her, yes, I know you want to do this thing, but I'm your mom. Trust me. Just listen to me. And as she gets older, that's getting harder and harder, I should say. But that brings me to my next question for you, Catherine, which is my 10-year-old is a sampler. She'll try a thing. And actually, I must say in our house, if we sign her up for a session of something and she ends up not liking it, we do make her see it through is what we call it. We signed up for something, we see it through, especially on a team. That team is counting on you. You're seeing it through until the end of the 8 weeks or whatever. But so she knows that going into it, she'll see through whatever she's chosen to sign up for. But she's a sampler. So she likes to dabble in this and dabble in that. Do you have any thoughts on whether there's an age at which we should be encouraging our children to dabble less? And I hate to use this word, but I'm going to use it, specialize more. I mean, these are kids and we're treating their childhood as a resume building opportunity. But there's my question. Is there a time when they should be dabbling less and, I hate this word, specializing more?
I don't know, because I feel like I'm kind of a dabbler in my adult life, and I don't mean that and I sign up for things and then I quit them. I just mean I view myself as a lifelong learner, and I like to learn this thing over here and that thing over there and this thing over here and put them together and build this beautiful life experience. So I don't think I'd want to take that away from my kids when they're young. I feel like when I was young, I loved dancing, don't get me wrong, but I kind of felt pigeonholed into it after a while because I also was only allowed to pick one activity. I mean, we did it multiple days a week, but one activity. I think that you get a little bit more around it if you can switch. And if you're not planning on really becoming a martial arts expert, if you really have fallen out of love with the martial art discipline you're doing and you want to switch into basketball, I personally don't see a problem with that. I think that that's a good way for them to really see their passion. I think the stick with itness of making sure you see through a session or making sure you stick with your team and don't let your team down, I think that's a more important lesson. And I think that it's important to know your limits. And if this isn't something that's feeling good for you, for your child, then it's time to switch. And I also think it's really important to think of the culture of the sport, the culture of the team. Last year, the baseball team might have been such a good fit and, your child got along well with the teammates. It was a great coach. And for some reason, baseball this year it's just not. They're just not connecting with the team. well, I wouldn't want to say you have to stick with baseball if it's not good for you in that way. Then are you aging out of this group and into the next group where they take it more seriously, can completely change it? And I think that they should be given some autonomy to voice that and switch out, and they shouldn't be kind of pigeonholed into something. Not that that's what I think you're implying, is that you have to make them stick with it. But when they're young is when they have the safety of us as parents to fall back on to explore these sorts of things. And I think that we also need to encourage them to remember that, like, the culture of your family, how does this activity fit in with our personal values at home? Because maybe that's going to shift, and maybe, they won't even know how to voice that, but that's an important thing that they're picking up on. That at the ripe old age of 11, they're just like, "Ooh, this doesn't feel right anymore." And if we really want them to, I'm going to call it specialize, then that might take away from validating that experience.
You mentioned there, Catherine, that you're a dabbler. And when you said that, I laughed because I'm a dabbler too. My whole life has been about doing this, that, and the other thing. And on the one hand, I think that dabbling is amazing, right? Because we have an awful lot of interests. We have awful lot to talk about. We're chameleons. However, the society that we live in, or maybe I shouldn't say that. I shall say the community that I live in is all about specialization. I'm not joking when I tell you that there are children I know who, from the age they could walk, have been primed by their parents to become athletic superstars. They're in all the things. The goal is that elusive athletic scholarship to a great school. It's on many people's minds. And if you don't, in my community in particular, I won't speak for yours or anybody else's, but in my community, if you're not on that track, it can feel like sometimes as a family not on that track that you're doing something wrong, or wait, did I miss the memo? Is this what we're supposed to be doing? So this is an intentional living show. It's about drilling down what matters to us. What are our values? We've been using that word a lot as well. But it can be really hard when everybody around you is going left and you're going right. Do you have any thoughts there? Anything to say? Does that resonate?
That resonates so deeply. We used to live in a community that sounds very much like yours. And, so I 100% can understand. All the kids do hockey and all the, you know what I mean? It just felt like everybody does these certain specific things. And if you don't, why wouldn't you? And so I can completely understand what you're saying. And ours weren't doing that even from a young age. Ours weren't aware that they were missing out yet. And I was very aware that if everything kept on the path that it was going, I was like, there's going to come a day when they're going to realize they're not hockey superstars and they're just average skaters at best. And that, I wonder if it's going to have social implications. So like that was my mom anxiety coming out. So I completely understand what you're saying when you go left and everyone else goes right. And I just think it comes back to, like you said, your family values and your family culture. And if that's not serving what you want as a family, I mean, life's full of hard choices. And I know that this isn't what people want to hear, but I mean, it's just the truth. It's our job to guide our kids the way we think is best. And if keeping up with the Joneses in the hockey realm or in the whatever is the most popular, I keep saying hockey because that was what was popular there. But if that's not what's serving your family, then as a team, for us, the 6 of us in my household, as a team for you in your household, as a team, we just have to make those decisions and make those values clear. And then if the child wants to try that out, I mean, support them. And if they never do, all the more power to them. But just keeping our family values and the culture of what we want our life to be at the forefront, that's where we can really just make those decisions.
Mm-hmm. A recent guest on my show, and I'm forgetting which guest, so the name escapes me, but I'll look it up and I'll add it into the show notes, listeners. But his point was, one of his many points was, when you're thinking about moving, thinking about settling down with the family for a decade or two, think about the community you're going to and really scrutinize that decision. When my husband and I moved to the suburbs, we did not scrutinize that decision. We did not do our due diligence. We just basically purchased a home in a town with an excellent school system that was as close to Boston as we could get financially. That's what we did. That's what we chose. If I had to do it again, I would have shopped the town a little bit more. Like I would have gone to the library, child book reading class. I would have hung out in the supermarket. I would have spent time in the town to hopefully garner a sense as to whether the way the parents are raising their children in this community is aligned with the way I want to raise my children. And so for anybody moving anytime soon, I highly suggest you shop the towns you're looking in first. Because again, I didn't, and now I'm feeling really out of place. So, Catherine, we're going to take our ad break, but when we come back, I want to talk about how extracurriculars fit into the we need to get ahead conversation. That's quite an American value, like work hard, get ahead, get to the top of the pack. How do extracurriculars fall into that conversation? And are we basically training our kids to do that from toddlerhood on? Are we or are we not? We're going to do that after our sponsor break. And we're back. Today I'm speaking with Catherine Garland. We're discussing extracurriculars. Yes, we are. Catherine is the host of the Homespun Create the Life You Crave podcast. And before the break, I alluded to the question I wanted to ask you, Catherine, which is all about, getting ahead, the rat race, right? So if we're all in a race, as a runner, I would argue that the term race implies that there's winners and there's losers, and you want to get ahead so that you win. There's not so much a place for those of us who just don't want to participate in the race, is there? We really got to carve that space out. So how do extracurriculars fall into the rat race, getting ahead conversation? Are some of us parents, are we using extracurriculars as a means to either consciously or unconsciously help our kids rise to the top of the pack and win the race?
I feel like that is definitely something that's embedded in us, especially because I think I'm in Canada, but I think in the States, I think you have a little bit more space on college applications and stuff for extracurriculars. I'm not saying there's not space in Canada. I haven't applied for decades now, but there was definitely some space for it then, but I feel like there's a bit more of a push in the United States to have that. So I think that that's probably definitely going to be something that's in the back of every parent's mind, because we want better for our kids than we had ourselves. We want the best for them. We want them to have the exact life that they hope and dream for. And so, I mean, that's in the back of our mind with every decision we make, whether it's conscious or subconscious, what we feed them, what we do with our spare time, which books we read to them, which movies we expose them to, insert anything here. That's definitely something that we're considering. So yes, I would say we're definitely putting them into the rat race. And if we're doing it intentionally, if we're doing it keeping in mind our family's values, the way the coach handles things, the way the mentor reacts to our children, how our children feel about the activity, how the peers on the team or at the gym, if we're keeping all of those things in mind, I think that we can set them up for success. Because success also, it means giving them all the skills, but it also means teaching them how to handle the things. And if the rat race is going to be part of their life in one way or another, then this is setting them up for success and how to handle that. And so I think it's a multifaceted situation where the exposure is the best equipment we can give them to this in life. We can't shelter them from all extracurriculars, or they won't have that exposure to understanding what the rat race might feel like. And it's even just, again, going back to that social connection, maybe it's something that you talk about in your home. It's just something you're aware of as a parent, but then they're going to be on a team with someone who's really aware of it, whether it's internal or from their family. And so that exposure is what's going to help them realize, is this something I want to participate in even? Maybe it's going to be something that they too will just not like, or maybe it's something that they'll find will motivate them to do better. Again, it just comes back to exposure and making sure that they have a solid foundation in what you value is most important.
Well, Catherine, I'd like to spend the rest of our time together defining ways in which a parent listening to us today can perhaps start to determine whether they've found that sweet spot for extracurriculars in their own home. So the sweet spot is, of course, that space where the schedule's not overstuffed, The bank account hasn't been drained because extracurriculars can cost an awful lot of money. The parents are not overwhelmed and cranky. The kids are not overtired, like finding the sweet spot. So, and again, like we've alluded to it, but we'll just say it loud and proud. Like every family is different and every kid is different. We've been talking about extracurriculars through the lens of maybe perhaps cutting back, doing less. But I'm thinking of some other children I know that maybe could do more. Maybe they don't traditionally put themselves out there. So more activities could honestly be beneficial to them, putting them out of their comfort zone, let's say. And so with the caveat that every family is different, every kid's different, how can parents listening know, like, where's the sweet spot? And I'll start. You said ask family first. Like, is the family suffering or thriving? That's a great tip. Any others?
I was in my late 30s before I really fully understood the term start with the end in mind. And I really try and embody start with the end in mind with all of my decision making. So I think that would be a great place to start with this. So start with like, what do you want for your child? Do you want them to get out of their comfort zone? Okay, then putting some more things in there would probably be a great place to start. So look at your calendar and make sure, but always make sure that you have time for you have time for your spouse, that, you're not so focused on one child that another child's going to feel like they don't have enough space and time in the week or what have you. So, like look at the big picture, zoom out, maybe look at a month. 1 week maybe won't be so full of appointments, but if you look at the month, you're going to be like, oh, wait, I've got to go to the orthodontist. I have to make sure I can fit that in every single month. Or I need to make sure that, we have time to visit grandma every single month. Whatever the case may be, zoom out and look at a whole month and figure out, okay, how much time do I have to dedicate to pushing them out of their comfort zone? All right, I can give them a solid 2 nights a week and 1 Saturday a month. What's something that I can do that's 2 nights a week and then something that can only be 1 Saturday a month, or whatever the case may be? So it's zoom out. I really think boredom's important. So making sure that you don't schedule every single nook and cranny so that there can be time for boredom and connection. But, and then it's okay to reevaluate. You did 6 months of 2 nights a week and every 1 Saturday a month. And it actually became really full because you didn't know that you'd need to have this thing in when you made that decision, and shifting and changing. But I think that zooming out and looking at the big picture and starting with the end in mind. So if you're a family who values spending a lot of time at home, okay, it might only be one activity each and you're going to try and cram them all in at the same night because we live rurally. So we all want to go to town only once a week and everyone's going to do their thing that day. And it's just going to be our one town day. We don't schedule like that. I wish we could though, to be honest. But, or like you said, pushing them out of their comfort zone is going to look like a fuller schedule. Or thinking, okay, well, we have a shift worker in the house. So as much as I want to push them out of the comfort zone, it's not practical for me to commit to more than this because I solo parent half the month just because of my partner's schedule, or whatever the case may be. So just really, what are the needs and values of yourself, your partner, your children, and zooming out and looking at the big picture, seeing how you can schedule such that it best serves, because there's going to be no perfect solution, but best serves that list that you come up with of what your family needs and wants.
Yeah. As you're talking there, Catherine, I'm thinking about the fact that in my family, we really prioritize nightly family dinners. Not every night, because even though I'd like to be perfect, I'm just not. Not every night, but most nights I try to have dinner on the table and I try to have it be something that I've cooked. So not takeout. So a great little litmus test for me as I'm assessing whether we're overscheduled on the extracurriculars is to just observe the dinner. Like, am I still having enough time to cook the dinner? And are we all home in order to eat the dinner together as a family? Or am I stressed out and overwhelmed and feeling the need to pick up that pizza on the way home? Is my older daughter scarfing down a piece of pizza when she gets home 2 hours later than when the rest of us ate? Like, those are really good clues, right? Because again, if dinner is more important to this family than the extracurriculars, if dinner starts to suffer, red flag central, right?
I love that you're talking about dinner, because dinner is honestly, that's one of my number ones. And it's the boys' martial arts, just one training is interferes with dinner. I think I mentioned this earlier. And that's the one hesitation to letting them do more than one night a week, because family dinner to me is so important as well. So I'm really glad you use dinner as a litmus test.
Thank you. I'll also say too, like, I've been working for so many years on observing my own moods. This is not something that comes natural to me. I'm a very externally focused person, but taking my observations of what's traditionally external and bringing it inward. So asking myself, like, does this feel right to me, the chauffeur? Am I stressed or am I feeling like I'm juggling all the balls, right? And if the answer is no, like if I'm honest with myself and the answer is no, then I need to honor myself and the way I'm feeling by pivoting. I'll also say too, just with the onus of observation, looking externally helps as well here. Like observe your kids. Are they animated and thrilled and excited when they come home from an extracurricular? Or are they like, it was good when you ask them how it went? I know for my older daughter in particular, I mentioned her earlier, she's willing to try all the things, but she's at an age now where she is able to discern the fact that some activities really, really light her up. They light that spark in her. She comes home beaming, but others, it's okay, right? Like it was good. And yeah, like maybe she can continue on with the good ones, or maybe if something needs to go, it's the ones that don't light her up. So observing our kids and having those conversations, like there is an age and it's not toddlerhood. It's not preschoolhood. It might not even be early elementary school. But there is an age in which kids can start to discern for themselves, like what are the most favorites and what are just nice to do.
And giving them a voice for sure so that they can say those things is so important so that you can scale up and scale back as needed. Yeah.
Before we say goodbye, Catherine, I just want to talk to you about something you mentioned a couple times, which is that boredom's good. Do you have any words of advice or encouragement for parents listening who are thinking to themselves, oh no, when my kids are bored, they wreak havoc. They need to be scheduled. Perhaps they even need to be over scheduled. Do you have anything to say to them?
I get it. It sometimes just feels, I don't want to use this word, but I'm going to. It feels easier because we know where they are and we know what they're doing and we know that they're going to be doing it. And so I totally understand. And just developmentally, boredom is just so important because that's where the creativity comes. And I am uncomfortable being bored myself as an adult. I couldn't tell you when or how that started, but I know that I am uncomfortable. I shouldn't say being bored because I have very little time. Most moms don't have much time for true boredom, but in the quiet and in the slow, if you lean into the quiet and the slow, it really is when you start to feel more at peace and more calm. And it's no different for children. It is different because boredom when you're young is a lot different than just quiet when you're an adult, but it's where the creativity happens. It's where they're going to, connect with their siblings, and connection might mean arguing. I understand that. And it happens. Like I said, I have 4 and they do connect that way sometimes, but it just is how you learn to navigate those tougher situations as well. Because our entire lives aren't meant to be completely scheduled. And as an adult, I don't like when it's completely scheduled. So as much as it might feel good because you're doing fun things with them when they're children, it's not necessarily going to set them up for success long term either. So, I mean, setting them up where they're comfortable with boredom when they're younger, it might make it easier later on. And again, I get it. When kids are bored, I so often just worry they're going to fight or they're going to those things, those negative things. But they also will decide randomly. One of my kids the other day decided to just go through the scrap bin and sew because she was just so bored. I thought, well, that's interesting. And if she was overscheduled, I don't know if she ever would have picked up a sewing needle, let alone that day. So it's opportunities for those just inspirations to hit really, really are important.
Yeah, I think it's important for us parents to remember that there's structured time and there's unstructured time. Extracurriculars are structured, right? It's fun and exciting, hopefully, but it's still structured time. Unstructured time is also important for our children and for us. It's important for everybody. Unstructured time to let our minds wander, to let our creativity blossom, to encourage our children to have an idea or a thought or a question or a query and see where it leads them. Great reminder to all of us parents listening. Our kids need structured activities, but they also need ample unstructured time on their calendars. I think that reality gets lost often in 2024. So, Catherine, what a conversation. Tell us where we can find more of you, but more specifically, what my listeners will hear on your podcast.
Thank you. As you said, my podcast is called Homespun, Create the Life You Crave, and it is just all about creating a life that is what you want it to be. How can we create a home life that is grounded and safe, where we can flourish and then go out into the world, the wide, wide world, and create whatever magic we need to. So it's all about just cultivating that really grounded, safe home space. And the conversations are about what that looks like and feels like. And so you can find me there on any of your favorite podcast platforms, Homespun, Create the Life You Crave. And I'm on Instagram as homespun.catherine. And you can find me on Facebook as Catherine Garland.
I've linked to all of that and more in this week's show notes, Catherine. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Happy upcoming school year. Happy extracurricular season. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Listeners, that's a wrap. Show notes at mamaminimalist.com/488. We'll be back on Thursday. See you then and take care.